So today's topic is about to build a ZK, build a ZK web application to communicate with the ChatGPT. So it's a beginner level uh, public training. So if you are very familiar with ZK, then just you can still stay, and maybe I will introduce something that you don't know. But if you are new to ZK, that's fine and that's good because this course is prepared for you. Um,
Yeah.
and I will mute most of you, everything, because during the training, I hope everyone can keep mute to avoid interrupt or affecting others. And in the end of this training, I will leave you some Q&A time so you can ask questions later. So first, okay, today's goal is what you see now is just a vacation, a simple vacation to like a chat room. But now this time we don't chat with a real person, we just chat for ChatGPT. So for example, this is the message and you can type here. For example, we can type, do you know ZK framework, and press the enter. And we will need to wait for several seconds the ChatGPT to reply, because now there are many people using ChatGPT. So sometimes the server, the ChatGPT service will get down, or sometimes it gets slow response. So that's the so sometimes it doesn't give you right answer because you can see, yeah, do you know ZK framework? Yeah, he will think it's a ZK, it's a zookeeper. But actually, he knows ZK UI framework. So maybe we need to be more specific. And maybe you don't want to, you can see when I press the enter, it will just submit the message, or you can just click the button to submit the message. And that's also a way. And you can see there's a process. So you can see next time it answer correctly. Yes, ZK UI framework is open source, creating internet application, Java, so it's more correct. And you can see, maybe you think when I submit a message, you will show up processing mask to block the whole page. And you might think, okay, this is a little bit late response, so we can click the fast response, so we can click, you can see, okay, it immediately show my my message here, but we still need to wait for the ChatGPT to reply to me. Yeah, because it always takes some time. So, but I block the input here to avoid user type more questions, because yeah, I want to hear the AI to reply me, and later I can type the next question. Okay, so this is the main two features I want to introduce today. So this is a very simple vacation that just submit a question to ChatGPT and then get this reply, and put a reply on this message area. So you can see, okay, yeah, sometimes I don't know. Today I asked for these questions, he just gave me a right answer, but now he seems the ChatGPT doesn't give me the right answer. He give me some code in Android, so I don't know why. But yeah, today I asked this question several times. Almost every time he give me the correct, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't give me the right one. So it's fun, but okay, that's the result. So let's go in deep to see how to um, build this kind of this kind of application. Okay, so if you're new to ZK, you might need to know there's a common way to build UI. So you can see there are actually several ways to build UI. First is to use our UI language we call ZK, user interface language. So it's called ZUL, or you might hear that ZUL. Or there's also a traditional way that you can build a UI like just like a Java Swing style. So I will show you later in a controller. So we can create a user interface by new a component, maybe new a button, and append this button into a window, something like this. Just the programming style is very similar like using Swing, but surely you use not the Swing component, you use ZK component. Or you can mix the two. You can call API in Java, but still provide a Azure template to dynamically create a UI. Okay, so this is the three ways I will show you today. So first, we see the simplest one is the Azure one, the Azure approach. The Azure means it's a XML format language that provided by ZK. So you can see here, when you write Azure, it means you write, for example, index.Azure. So we don't create a HTML page like a index.html. No, you will create the index.Azure file. And inside this Azure, you should write some tags. And then these tag names are component names. So in today's training, I will use IntelliJ IDE to demonstrate the whole process because now we think IntelliJ is better than Eclipse. So if you're using Eclipse, it's also fine. You can have you can install Eclipse plugin called ZK Studio to help you write Azure. And in the IntelliJ, there's also a plugin that contributor 100 is the ZK plugin. You can see. So in this IntelliJ, you can we strongly recommend you to install this ZK plugin because it will give you some hint, like when you type a tag name, it will give you some hint so you don't need to remember all the components then because there are hundreds. So for example, you can type buttons, and there is also an attribute word completion and content assist. So you don't need to remember all the attributes. And yeah, so it will help you. If you are using MVVM, it will also prompt you MVVM syntax. So it's very good helper. If you use IntelliJ, I will recommend to install the ZK plugin. So it will help you a lot when you're writing Azure. And if you forget any component name, you can just check our component reference. For example, here. So you can see there are many components here. So every component name, there's a corresponding tag. For example, you can see my Azure, there's a div, h layout, and checkbox and button. So actually there are div here. So we create, you can see we name this component with capitalized D because there's also a corresponding Java class called div, and there's a checkbox, and its tag name is just checkbox, all in lowercase. So you can see if you want to use our components, you can check these component list here to see what kind of component you want to use. Surely there's just have some just a name list, but if you want to see some real life demos, run interactive demo, you can go to our ZK demos to see, okay, there are many components. You can even search like checkbox. It will give you some examples so you can interact without setting up your environment or project that you can try here. You can also give you the code, have some descriptions, and so you can try many components here to see how does it look, how to interact with it. Okay, or for example, this box. And so we can see some features here. and interact to see if this is the component that you want. And there are also related code here. You can reference to build your own. So, okay, so first, when building UI in ZK, you need to use our ZUL languages. This can save you most of the time because when building an enterprise application, usually you just don't need to create from scratch. You don't need to create from very single div. Usually you want something predefined, like a drop down, like a drawer or caption or list box, something already made. So the ZK will provide hundreds of components that you can use. And these components actually, you can see, it finally still generated into HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So when you write a checkbox in ZUL, actually it also generates a checkbox and with something complicated outside because of style and extra features. You can see it actually not just generate a checkbox, it also generates something else, extra things, because we provide other features and styles. So you can use checkbox instead of using the pure HTML checkbox by yourself. So because we support more features and you can control by Java. So that's the benefits and strengths of ZK. You don't need to build a component from scratch, from detail, from the HTML, from CSS by yourself. You just specify the checkbox. Then you got many things. First, ZK will create a checkbox component, checkbox Java component class at the server side. So you can see if you open checkbox here, you can see there's a ZK checkbox class here. So when you write a checkbox here, actually ZK will parse this ZUL file and create corresponding checkbox Java objects at the server side and create a corresponding checkbox JavaScript widget at the client side, and also its CSS class also in its DOM elements here. So you can see if you just need to write a checkbox here, actually ZK create two parts, the client side part and server side part. So you need to control the server side component, then the server side component will render the JavaScript, the client side for you. So you don't need to worry about the client side's appearance of the browser issue, the CSS issues, HTML issues. You just need to focus on your business logic to call ZK in Java API, then ZK will render for you. So that's the strength. So to building a page, HTML page, you can see like this. You don't actually need to write a very detailed HTML tag because you can see this is HTML tag is very complicated in this page, although it looks not so complicated, but actually it composed by many divs here, buttons. So, but in here, you can see the corresponding ZUL page is relatively simple. And that's the strength of ZUL because it's easy to read. If you create a UI by Java Swing, then you will see a lot of Java code like new button, new checkbox, and append. And it's hard to understand or how to read to know, okay, what's the roughly layout. So with this tool, you can see at least it doesn't show you the real UI, but at least you will know a roughly layout. For example, okay, there's a div, outside is a container, and inside there's an edge layout. The edge layout means the horizontal layout. That means you will arrange components in a horizontal order. So you can see there are two divs inside, and they are horizontal. The first div and second div, they align horizontal. The first div is the title and the checkbox. So the second div is the message box here. Okay, so yeah, the message box. So you can see we arranged them horizontally, the title and checkbox here and the message box here. So if you want to arrange component horizontally, you can just use edge layout and then put divs or other component inside, and every component inside the edge layout will be arranged horizontally in a row, in a line. So you can see this is on the left. I put it just like a sidebar here, and the message box inside here. So okay, you can see in the message box, I will put a div. It's a message box that I can put use to store the message. And then I put another edge layout here to put my text box and button, because I want them to be in a row, in a line. So I also use another edge layout to make the text box. You can see the text box here. So it's on the left and the buttons on the right. Okay, so this is the UI. The first UI name you can, the first way to build UI is using the Zuo. So you can see it's easy to understand. You can, when you see this page, you can roughly get the idea of this page. How does it look like? You don't need to see in the browser. Okay, but okay, next it's about okay, let's see. So the first way is Zuo, and later we can next one. So the component usage is, yeah, first you need to locate what kind of component you want to use to check our component reference, and you can find its attributes will determine their features. So you can see there are, for example, check. Let's see the simplest one, the buttons. So the button will have many attributes. So the attributes will determine its features. For example, if you set disable true, then you will disable. And if you set labels, then it will show the labels. So if you want to control the components, you can using the attribute, just specify the attribute. So each attribute has different features, but some attribute have some support complicated features. For example, like auto disable or upload. So you can check our document to see its details explanation to see how you can specify these attributes. And some attributes are quite simple, like disable, and it's easy to understand. Then you can just use it. And some are complicated, so it's better you can check our documents in component reference. You will explain some complicated features, complicated attribute. And actually, you can also check our Java API, because actually each attribute there's a corresponding status. For example, set disable. So if you see there's a set disable, that means there's an attribute called disable in lowercase. You can set for this component. So when you set disable, when you specify disable on the Zuo here, that actually ZK is calling set disable with the parameter true for you. If you see there's a label, that means actually there is a set label here. You can see set label API here. So the component reference does not list all the properties or the attributes, because there are too many and some are inherent. So we just list some of the complicated one and explain it here. So for full attribute, you can check the setter and getter here. So every attribute, you can see there's a set disable and there's a get disable. Oh, sorry, it is disabled. Okay, so that's second place you can check the attribute. So so for using the Zuo, first you locate the component, you specify tag and specify attribute. If you don't find it, you can check the component reference or our demos to know how to use it. And then you can lay out by using we call flexible size. That means there's an attribute is quite special. We call edge flex or call V flex. The edge means horizontal, V means vertical. So horizontal flexibility means you can specify a number here, and it represents a proportion. So if you specify 1 and 2, means if you specify 1 for one component and specify 2 for another component, means the first component will consume the 1/3 proportion of the whole width, and the second component will consume 2/3 of the whole width. So in our case, you can see I specify here. I use edge layout, means these two divs will arrange horizontally. And the first one, I specify edge flex 1, and next I use edge flex 7. Okay, so it means this, I didn't specify a fixed pixels or percentage. That means it does not render as fixed pixels. So I don't specify, for example, 200 pixels or 700 pixels because I want them to be a proportions size. And this is, so if I resize it, you can see it will resize automatically, but still keep its proportions. So this is the 1/8, and this part is 7/8. Okay, so that's the way you can determine its size by proportion. For example, I can make it to 2. That means it's 1. This part is 1/3, and this part is 2/3. So if I reload it, you can see, okay, this is 1/3 and this 2/3. So its width is different, and by proportion. So you can see ZK would determine its size by proportion you specify on the edge flex. So this is the one way, the flexible way to determine the width. So the V flex means the proportional way to determine the height. And the one, if there's only one component and you specify 1 or 2, there's no difference because it always consumes the whole height. That means you will consume the whole height of its parent. Okay, because there's only one parent, one component here, and it's 1, so it means it's 100 of the only one component. Okay, so this is the edge flex and V flex, and so you don't need to specify a fixed width or height in ZK, because if you see, you will resize it. And actually underlined, you can see if you check the CSS here, actually ZK implement this by using the CSS flex box. So you can see there's a flex scroll 7. Yeah, that's because I row specify 7. Yeah, if you uncheck it, you can see it just shrink its width. So ZK will generated this flex scroll proportion for you. So we use the ZK, use CSS flexbox to implement this flexibility size. Okay, in the next one, you can see sometimes, although ZK is component is very powerful, but actually sometimes you would just want something simple. For example, I just want HTML H1. Maybe you want something else, but it's fine. So you can easily mix HTML tag inside a ZK, a ZUL page by specifying a namespace. So I can determine a prefix H with the namespace we call native. Actually, it means just native HTML tag. So here, if I append, add an H prefix here, then ZK parser will know, okay, this part is HTML. So I don't process it. I don't treat it as a ZK component. I don't really create any component for it. So this will be just pure HTML and will be rendered outside to the resulting page. So you can see here, this is just H1 chat with AI. So this is very this is the main way you can specify, you can mix HTML tags here, because maybe some part is designed by a UI designer and he creates HTML snippet and it's static. That means the text never change. That never change, so you don't need to use ZK components because the component is used to dynamically change its content or its looking. So if you just want to render a static, a pure text that never change, this way can save you some memories. So you don't need to create a component at the server side. So it's a good way. And actually, so actually ZK support other namespace. So you can check the developer reference. So this is the way you can mix the HTML tag. Okay, and the next one, when we create this kind of UI, we want to decorate it with CSS, because if you don't, that will be very ugly. So to using the CSS, okay, let's remove something. And you can see we can include a CSS file style with CSS like this. So in here, you can specify CSS. And so this is the I think this is the normal way. You include a CSS file and in this page, and it contains CSS. And there are two ways to specify CSS to customize a component. For example, first here, you can use a style. Every component supports a style attribute. So you can specify style directly, and you will render as a style in the HTML. So if I check here, message box, you can see there's an overflow Y here in the style attribute in the final HTML element. So this overflow while is what I specify. You can see here is what I specify here. Okay, so I can just simply specify here to get something border maybe 1 pixel red. So this is the simplest way. Yeah, something like this. But I break something. So okay, I want to remove it because I don't specify solid, so it doesn't have a border. Okay. And so this is the first way. And the second way is to use the CSS class. You can specify, you can put some CSS class on any components. But since the class, this word is a reserved one in Java, so we use a similar word like S class, means it's a style class, not a Java class. So the attribute name actually is S class. So you can put some S class on it. So and then you can decorate these components with CSS by class selector. So this is class select like message box. I wanted to have borders and 2 pixels, border radius and margin and line height, something like this. So you can specify it with this CSS class. So this is CSS class will render, ZK will render it. So you can see it will be rendered on the div class, like a message box here. So the message box is what I specify. And there's a container, you can see. This is also what I put it on the top div. And you can see actually, in addition to this container or message box, also you can see other ZK built-in CSS class like z-div, z-something. So every ZK built-in CSS class will start with a z dash. So if you see this, you can see, okay, this is the z dash. It's a built-in ZK CSS. So you can also override it with z dash with this kind of CSS. But remember, you will affect all the div. So if you just want to customize specific div, maybe, then it's better to specify a special CSS class like a container or a message box. Then you can customize the specific one. So in my case, I think for example, if I want to customize the text box height, I can just override it Z text box with height 38 pixels, something like this. But surely it will affect all text box on the page. But since my page has only one text box, so it doesn't care. So you can see here, height 38 pixels, and it comes from style CSS here. Okay, so this is the two ways to customize component. Either you can customize every component in the same categories, for example, all text box, or you can just put a special your custom CSS class and customize it with your CSS class. Okay, so you can see I customized it with this. So this is the way, and you can customize. And the next thing is also you can see there's a special class name is called icon S class. Icon S class, you can specify a built-in Phone Awesome icon. So ZK integrate Phone Awesome 4.7. So you already contain all these icons. So you just need to specify the icon's name, and so ZK will render it. So you can see there's a icon like a paper airplane. It's a send. So you can see the icon send. So how to use it? You can check the send here. So you can see there's a send icon here. So just append the Z dash icon dash. So this icon will show in ZK. So that's why you can see here. That's because I specify a Z icon send. So this send, this name comes from Phone Awesome. And the Z dash icon dash is the ZK one, because we do some fine tunes to make it more compatible with ZK. So I can also use, for example, the icon send O. So reload, you can see become old, the icon. So this is built-in icon. So you don't need to include any resource from Phone Awesome. You already bundled with ZK framework. You just use it by you specify the name here. Okay, so it's very convenient. You can there are lots of icon built-in. You can use it. Okay, the next one is about to implement the logic. That's the important part. So that's, you can see the components, the flexible size here, check the CSS flex, and mix the HTML and use the style as class and Phone Awesome. So the next step is to implement your application logic in a controller. And there are just three steps, roughly three steps. First, you need to create a component controller and apply it on a specific component. Second, you need to wire components to control them. Third, you need to wire event listeners in a selected syntax and implement your application logic inside the controller. So this is the three main steps. So first, let's go to see the controller here. We call it chatroom composer. The composer is a ZK's concept. It's actually it's composed to compose the UI, so we call it composer. But yeah, so if you usually we would suggest you using selector composer. You need to select extend the selector composer and extend the selector composer. The benefits to you can use some kind of wire annotation to wire components to use and wire event listener to use it. So for first, you just need to create a class here, chatroom composer, and extend this selected composer is provided by ZK, and that's all. And then you need to specify here, applied this composer, and it plays a role in a controller. So currently today, what I introduce you is the MVC patterns in ZK, which means it's model, view, controller. And there are another patterns you can see. If you see ZK's documents, you can see there are two patterns. First, the MVC. MVC is a general terms. It doesn't mean ZK's MVC, but in ZK, we use these terms to indicate a kind of programming patterns. Means if you control the component, control the UI by calling components API, like using for example, component set visible. That's the way, that's one way, the one pattern you control the UI that ZK support is MVC. We call it MVC. It's model view controller. So the controller means it's the class that extends selector composer. And there are second pattern we support. It means MVVN is model view models. So you can see only the controller is replaced by a view model. And view model is also plays the role controller, but actually it doesn't, the special things, it doesn't contain any reference to any ZK components. But why we introduce MVC today is because it's easy to understand, it's more institute, and it's more friendly than for beginners. The code is very easy to you can understand. For MVVN, because it uses data binding to bind between the view model and the zoo and the view and UI. So actually it relies more internal behavior of ZK frameworks. So it takes more time to understand the ZK framework's internal behaviors. So it takes more time to learn. It's also very powerful patterns, but yeah, it takes more time. So it's not so friendly for the beginners. So that's why we introduce MVC today. So in MVC patterns, you need to get the controller, get the component to control it. So actually, when you want to control a component, you don't need to write a new. For example, I actually don't need to write a new div. There's no need here because every component is created by ZK. So when you specify a component, so a controller here, that means this controller can control this div and all its child components here. So if there's another div here, for example, if I write another component out of this div, maybe don't use div, use button. Okay. So this button actually is out of the scope of this chatroom composer. So this button cannot be controlled by the chatroom composer directly. Yeah, there's always a way to control it, but not directly. So you cannot wire a component, wire this button into chatroom composer. And why do we call wire, or that's the concept from like Spring? You don't need to new a div object here, because when you visit this page, ZK will parse the whole page and new every component in ZK framework. So you will new a div, new a layout, new. You will call the new statement for every component you specify here. So it actually already created component for you, not by yourself. So what you need is to wire the component into. So ZK framework will inject the component, the div he created into this composer for you, unless you only need to write a wire annotation and declare a variable. Sure, then the type should match. For example, there's a div and there's a message box. So you can see the message box is here. It's a div. So I need to declare a div with message box. And I can wire with the CSS selector like syntax, which means it's a class selector. So it means there is a component whose type is div and its CSS class, its S class is message box. So you can see here, let's put it side by side. So here you can see the message box here. So I can wire this into this. And the default way actually is the ID selector. So I don't specify any selector. That means you will use the variable name as the ID. So my message is here. So the ID is the text box whose ID is my message. So you will wire the component text box here. And then the send, the button into here. And also we can wire a checkbox here. And this is component name. So the component is checkbox. So you will wire the checkbox because this is the only one checkbox in the page. So I can write like this, or you will find multiple checkbox. So so you will find the first checkbox and wire the component inside here. So that's the way you can wire a component into your composer. Then later you can write the application logic into your event listener and with this component. So this is the first step to create a component, and secondly, wire the components. Create a controller, wire the component inside, and then we need to implement our application logic. So first we need to listen is the when you press the button send, then you will send. So there's a listener here, you can see. Unclick send buttons and it will invoke the send. So if I start the application with debug mode, then it will stop here. So when this syntax means it will register this method as an event listener and listen, unclick on the send button. So when I click the send, it will actually send the message. And I will check if the message box is empty. If it's empty, I don't send. So I will check if the fast response is checked. If it's not checked, we just submit normally. And this submit, you can see, let's make it bigger. Okay, I append my message means what I mean. Maybe my question is, do you know ZK framework? So I will get values. So my message box is a text box. I can get value. That means you will get user input. So I can append my message box into the message. My message into message box. So I can new a div. So this you can see. This way is the second way you can build an application. Is you can new a div to create a div like a swing. So new a div because this div is the dynamically created. It's not created at the beginning in the Zool. So I want to create a div, and I can create a component with the Zool. So you can provide a Zool, writing a rule in a string, like there's a label, and I can put my message div as a parent. So I will create a label and append to this div. Okay. So and then I will append the message box with this message div. Okay. So this is the way you can compose the components by Java and by the Zool, mix them together. Okay, so you can see if I try to type, for example, hi, so I press let's set the breakpoint here. Let's set the breakpoint here. So if I type hi and I click the send, I restart the server. So I click the send here, you can see stop here because I register listener on click send. So it will go into the submit and append. Okay. So it will take some time because the append AI message takes a longer time. So it will showing the processing message here. Okay, let it go. So this is the way. The first way you can the way you can implement your application and register event listener here. The second event is on OK event. On OK event on my message. Then on OK event means when I press the enter in the text box. So because sometimes I don't need to click the button, I want to see, for example, who are you? I want to press the enter button to submit the message instead of just clicking the button. So I press the enter, you can see it's also invoke the same method because I register these two events. So let's just let it go. Okay. So this is the way you can, okay, just remove this. So this is the way you can implement your application event listener to implement your application logic. Then you might think, okay, this is a little bit laggy because when I submit my questions, actually it's block all my screens and I don't even see my message. So maybe I want something faster, for example, like this. So I can see, for example, I am Hog and I press I can see my message here, but waiting for AI to respond. So that will make user think, make user feel like the response is fast. Actually, yeah, but that just render my own messages. But see something, but waiting for AI to respond. That's the part I cannot speed it up, but at least I can print my message on the message area first. So this is the way you can best response. And though this is a little bit different, and I can still think. So when this checkbox is checked, I will use the submit to. And the submit to do things a little bit different. Yeah, actually first will append my message. It takes a short time and clear the text box. And it fire echo event on ask. That means it's a custom event because there's not built-in ZK event. And show busy, wait for reply. It will show the busy. So you can see when I click check the fast response, it will go to these methods. So it will quickly run this logic. So this method will run very quick because it just append my messages and fire ask event. So you can see my message I'm Hawk immediately appear here because it doesn't take times to wait for AI to respond. And it just go back and show my message here. Then he fire on ask event from the client side to server side to invoke the next event listener here. And in this event listener, I just calling AI here, append AI message. Inside here, I just use the chat service to call AI to ask my question. So these will take times. The prompt will take maybe 5 seconds. So you can see it will immediately render my message I'm Hawk and then take my 5 seconds to waiting these to respond to show. Okay. So the user will at least see his message very fast and then wait for AI. This is expected. So this is the two different way you can handle. And there are small things you can see. I click the fast response. You can see the icon change. Okay. Oh, because I changed to. Okay. You can see if I click the fast response, the icon will change. So this is also by using the ZK API, the component API. When I uncheck the checkbox, then you will toggle the icon as class. So this is the way you can control a component. For example, the send button, I want to change its icon as class. If it's as class is send, that means it's a paper airplane, then it will change to fast forward or just switching between these two icons, fast forward or icon send. So that's how we can implement some simple logic like by checking the checkbox and switching between the two icons. Okay. Okay, that's the basic application. And for checked service, let's see that this is the main service that we communicate with the ChatGPT. So if you prefer, that's very simple. If you want, you can check this document. First, you need to create an API key, yeah, to go to their website to get the web API key. Yeah, you need to apply. Currently, it's free, so you will get some API key. Now I put it into some config properties here, so you can see it look like something like this. So I will load the API key, and to make things simple, I don't use any libraries are just created by HTTP URL connections to make things simple. And its UI, its API is URL is here, the completion. Actually, it seems I remember it creates several one, but this one is the is more like a communication in a dialogue. So this is the completions, and actually there are several. There are text completion or some kind of other, or you can see there's a edit. There are other API like edits or even images. So what we use is the completions, and because this completion is like a complete sentence or complete a dialogue, something like this. So you can ask questions and he will answer. So I call these completions. So I knew URL was this completion API, and I just prompt with my questions. So I send the request, and request you can see there's I use the latest model, DaVinci 03, and prompt with my questions. This is his format, temperatures, max tokens, is the mass response characters tokens, and then just the rest just Java code, normal Java code, nothing special. That's very easy. So you can check detail later. So just prompt and get it. The response is to, where's to get the response? Here. If you read the response, then actually it's a JSON response. You can get the text, one of its field is text. The text contain the reply. There are other fields contain other things, but what I consider is what I need is just get the response. So get the text returned. So that's how we implement the chat service. So you can see the chat service, just prompt was my questions and get the response, and I put it in the label. So this is the way another way you can create like Java Swing. So if you want to create a new div with a new label, and you can set S class with, for example, AI, and put this div, put this label into div, and then put the AI response into another label. And because it might be multi-line, so you set it multi-lines and append it into a message div, and then later put the whole div into message box. So this is the second way. You can create a UI by just pure Java. So you can see this, comparing this code to the Zuo, you can see this is hard to understand. No, it's hard to know the roughly layout, but you can understand, sure, but it's hardly to understand the roughly layout compared to the index. Okay, so there are two ways. First, three ways. There are Zuo, building UI by Zuo, building UI by Java, and by Java with Zuo mixing together. So if you check the code layout, you can see, sorry, I should press hi. Okay, wait for seconds. Okay, take some times. And let's see. So the three steps here, okay, just to give you a recap. Controller, create controller, wire components, and wire event listener. And then next is I introduce two features, normal send or the fast response using echo events. And actually you can access the whole application source code in the GitHub. So if you go to the GitHub with ZK demos, you can see there's an AI chatroom. You can get the whole project here, and you can run it very simple. Just run a task with Gradle, start Jetty Runner. That's it's very easy to run. You don't need to install anything. Just the Gradles. Okay. So and then let's see. Okay, let's see. You can see here. There's a div. So when I create, I put a div and I put my labels here and etch my message here. So one div, it contains two labels. So you can see here, one label has a class me. So I can click customize color by blue. Okay. Oh, I think I write something wrong. It should be font weight bold. Okay. So you can see, then you can customize with CSS with special asset class, label, and DIB here. So the AI response also is put into a div with two labels. One is chat AI, one is label. So you can see this totally the same result, but with you can create them by different ways, either by Java Swing style or by mixing style. Okay. And let's see. Okay, I think it's roughly today's demonstration about the qualification. So is anyone has any question? If you have any question, you can either type something in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone to speak out your questions. Welcome, any questions? Okay, it seems no one has questions. If you still have questions later, maybe you think something after this training, you can write to info@zcos.org. I will type the info zcos.org. Write something to you. Okay, thank you everyone. If you if you have no question, you are free to leave and stay tuned for the next training. Or if you have any comments for our training topics, just feel free to send us your comments or send us your the topic you were interested to us, so we will know what kind of topic you want to know. We will hold the next free training for those topic you interest. So we welcome any feedback. So bye-bye. If you have no question, if you still have question, you can leave your comments or question in the chat, or you can unmute your microphone to speak out your questions. Thank you for joining this training. So please remember to check out our next training, and or if you are interested in any topic, feel free to send some comments or feedback to us. We welcome your any feedback. So because yeah, we sometimes are thinking what kind of topic we want to hold the training. So thank you for everyone. Thank you for joining. Okay. It seems no one has no questions, so I will stop this training, stop the meeting for now in a short time. So thank you for everyone. Let's see you next time.